I do want to welcome and thank my colleague, Bruce Seid from Keller Williams Commercial. He's our regional, senior regional director for commercial. He's going to be talking with us today about the valuation of income property, specifically multifamily. He's very well versed in the commercial world. He does office leasing, industrial, commercial, and residential. And the knowledge and just the knowledge that he imparts is highly, highly valuable, because he really gets into the calculations, as you'll see shortly, all those little acronyms, GRM, ROI, COC. So he's going to start to explain all of this. Bruce, was there something you wanted to add before you start your presentation?
Yeah, you didn't tell me you were putting this live on Facebook.
Yay! Well, then you can also, this is good for you. You could also like hook it up or link it to your Facebook, and that way everybody could see you speak.
Is this on your page?
Should I have had you write, fill out a rider or a waiver for this?
I don't know. You have to talk to my agent about that.
Okay, or your attorney.
It's on
You'll be fine.
Okay. Wow. So my turn. Do I have anything I want to add?
All yours. Yeah. What would you like us to
I'm just
know?
going to apologize ahead of time for drinking while I'm doing this, because I don't drink much and I haven't eaten today. So since breakfast. So this should be interesting. I'm going to share a screen with you guys and run through a PowerPoint if you don't mind. So you'll see my face a whole lot smaller, but that's okay. I think everyone should be able to see that. Give me a thumbs up if you can see that. Okay, somebody. Okay, awesome. So that's what I look like in my regular business world when it's not COVID and I'm not working from home most of the time. But you got me in t-shirt and jeans today. So we're going to talk about real estate investing. And although I'm a commercial broker and I do primarily office and industrial leasing and helping owner users buy their building, my real passion is investment property. It's what got me into real estate. It's what I love helping people do, whether it's a tenant buying their own building to grow wealth and create an exit strategy, or somebody buying their first investment property from a single family. I don't do those. Go talk to Candace and David about that, but I love the investment side of it. I do a lot of apartment buildings, and we're going to talk about this on a residential 1 to 4 unit level today. There'll be a few things in here that relate to commercial. Commercial is considered anything without a bed. So office, retail, industrial, hospitality, which is a hotel, land, certain land development deals, that's commercial. Any property that's apartments that's 5 units or more is categorized as commercial, because residential lenders typically aren't doing those deals. And I think you'll be talking to Natalie later. She probably knows some great people, but everybody kind of has a specialty. And investment property, 1 to 4 units, is handled by a residential real estate mortgage broker or lender. And 5 units plus, it's all different. There is no RESPA, which are the federal guidelines protecting buyers and borrowers. There's a very different valuation, and there's very different underwriting. So it's completely different. So to keep it simple, this is going to be 101 today, not 201. So a little bit about me. I was a competitive gymnastics coach for 20 years, and that's how I naturally got into commercial real estate. I joke about that, but I did do my leases in my 15,000 foot industrial property a couple different times over the years, which actually got me interested in real estate. And the broker I worked with is the one who suggested I get into real estate after I sold my business in 2002, almost 20 years ago, and moved back to Los Angeles, where I am now. Here's a fun fact. Those of you guys who've been watching the Olympics, if you saw Jade Carey win a gold medal on floor, I coached Jade Carey when she was about 18 months old in a class with her mom, and mom used to help her walk across the beam. So I don't think I could take much credit for her success, but she did start it at the gym that I owned, and that's kind of fun to say. So real estate looked easy and fun, and I would have lots of freedom. And I started in residential and transitioned to commercial because I didn't like residential. I wasn't into houses and views and decor. That's some KW stuff. I'm on some leadership panels. I've moved from Pasadena. I'm back in Los Feliz. And I also have a coaching company. We coach commercial real estate agents and coach investors. And I'm a dad, I'm a diver, and I'm a Dodger fan. Sorry if you like the Angels or another team. So we're going to talk about why and how with real estate today. One of the big things is real estate investing is misunderstood in the I hate the word mainstream media, but it is misunderstood, and there are a lot of facts left out when they talk about real estate. When the media talks about real estate as compared to the stock market, they talk about the appreciation level in real estate, what it's done year over year. It's gone up 4%, 5%, 3%. They don't talk about what it really has done. So they say the stock market outperforms real estate, because I believe the stock market is somewhere in the 8 to 10% range as a return over like any 10-year period. Maybe it's even longer. I'm not an expert, not a financial advisor. However, they don't talk about leverage. They don't talk about cash flow. They don't talk about, I have to move my pictures so I can read my own slides. They don't talk about tax benefits. They don't talk about things you can do to increase the value of your real estate, whether it's physical things or financial things. So it's really an apples and oranges comparison. It is absolutely not what they say it is. And when you open up a financial magazine, a Kiplinger's, a Forbes, a Money, you are not going to see advertisements for real estate. You're going to see advertisements for mutual funds and brokerage services. And that's where they make money. So financial advisors are not generally telling people to get involved in real estate. And if you've got a financial advisor that's encouraging you to divest and be involved in real estate too, you have one of the good ones that's generally looking at the overall picture. I'm a real estate guy. 80% of my investments are in real estate, but I still have a 401k and some stocks and that. So I don't think you should go one way or the other completely, but real estate does perform better if you know how to look at it than the stock market in most situations. I won't buy real estate if I'm not earning a double-digit return on it or greater, usually 12+%. I can't say that about the stock market, even though we've had some great years and things have gone nuts in certain years. Over time, the stock market has not done 12% a year, and I don't get tax benefits, and I can't shelter the profit, the capital gains when I sell it. So that's a big misunderstanding. Some people call it a myth understanding. Why real estate? I think it's an able investment. And I stole this out of a book called The Millionaire Real Estate Investor that was written by Gary Keller, who happened to be the founder and chairman of the board of my company. I'm with KW Commercial. He started Keller Williams in 1983. It's accessible. Anyone can buy it. You got to be 18. It's appreciable. It increases in value over time. Now, I'm not saying the stock market doesn't do these things. It's leverageable. You can buy with margin. You can borrow against the equity. So you can get a loan to buy real estate. It's very hard to go to the bank and ask them for a loan of $100,000 to buy stocks and bonds. They're not going to give it to you. And if you want money out, you can pull it out tax-free through a refinance, and Natalie can help you with that. And it's not taxable, and you can reinvest that money. It is rentable, which brings in cash flow to you, which is the big buzzword that most of us are looking for in our real estate. It is improvable. You can do things to affect the value. I can't do much to affect the value of my stock portfolio. I own Starbucks. I guess I could buy extra cappuccinos, but that's probably not going to affect the value. It's deductible. Everything you spend, except for the principal you pay down, which isn't really an expense, is deductible. It's depreciable. There's great tax benefits. It's also deferrable when you sell it. You don't have to pay taxes now. So those three are tax benefits, the D words: deductible, depreciable, deferrable. And it's stable. As much as we talk about a bubble, it does not crash overnight. You'll see the stock market take a hit of 1,000 points, 1,500 points. Real estate has never done something like that overnight. Believe it or not, it's a lot slower than most people think. And it's livable. So worst case scenario, can't afford your house anymore, you can sell it and move into your rental property. Here's some of those acronyms that Candace was talking about earlier. By the way, I'll apologize ahead of time. I talk really fast. I'm doing an hour and 15-minute presentation in about 35 minutes. So I'm going to go extra fast. Please, we'll do plenty of questions at the end, jot them down and hit me up at the end and just try to follow along, because as I have this drink, I'll probably talk faster and a little less clear. Okay, GRM, gross rent multiplier. Most of you have heard of it if you've looked at an investment property. Doesn't mean much. It's a global, super limited picture of of, I'm sorry, I was trying to read my own writing there. It's a picture, it's like looking at the Earth from Jeff Bezos's space capsule. Well, not really, because he didn't see the whole Earth. It's like looking at the Earth from the space station. It's a global view. We cannot tell about the fires in California or the floods in the South or starvation in parts of the world. We can't see that when we look at this big, beautiful blue and green ball with clouds. It looks gorgeous. The GRM is simply a number that lets us know if we want to look further. And the way you calculate a GRM, do I have it here? No, is you take all the rents that come in on an annual basis, add it up, forget anything about expenses, and you divide them into the purchase price or into the value of the property. So if you got $100,000 in rent and you divide that into $1 million property, you'd have a GRM of 10. Okay. I think I did that right. I'm not going to check it, but it's the number of times the rent goes into the price of the property. The lower that number is, the better. But I don't use this number ever because it doesn't tell the story. It doesn't tell you because it only looks at the rents that you capture. It doesn't tell you what it costs to own this property. It doesn't tell you if you're paying the expenses of the meters, the utilities. It doesn't tell you if tenants are reimbursing you for CAM charges or for certain fees. It's only the rents, and it's really not a full picture. It's like, imagine it's like looking at the Earth. Okay, so that it's important to know what it is, but you don't want to buy something based on its GRM. It might just catch your interest, like something in a store window that might make you decide you want to walk into the store. All right, then we've got cap rate. Everyone's heard of a cap rate. That's the big buzzword that we love. Now, this is a lot more important in commercial and 5 units plus than it is in 1 to 4. But a cap rate is it's a yield. You earn a cap rate on your bank account. You earn a cap rate on anything that provides income. You can calculate a cap rate. It can always be calculated. The difference with commercial and residential property is that your cap rate determines the value of your property in commercial real estate. And in residential, the cap rate it doesn't affect the value. When you buy a property and you increase the rents, it doesn't change the value of your property when it's 1 to 4 units. When it's commercial, it does change the value of your property. So commercial can be a little bit more powerful as far as what you can do to control the value and the income, but it's also a lot more expensive to get into. We can get into residential property, on the level, telling a banker you're going to buy it as an investment, generally for about 25%. In California, it's usually 35% is the minimum, but they're going to run a formula we'll talk about in a little bit, and it's probably going to take 40% to 55% to buy a commercial or a 5-unit apartment building or greater in California, just because our rents are not as high as the values of the property, and so the banks want a lot more, you to have a lot more skin in the game, and they'll give you less. So a cap rate is one of those numbers that basically says if you pay cash for the property and you collect all the rents and you pay all the expenses, what's left over is your cash flow essentially, and you calculate how much of a percentage that is of the purchase price. So if you buy $1 million property, and after you collect all the rents and pay all the expenses, you have $50,000 left, you have a 5% cap rate because 50,000 is 5% of $1 million. Okay. It doesn't affect how that property will return for you because it assumes you're paying cash. So a cap rate is used to compare one property to another. All things being equal, if you said, hey, I've got a property here that's a 5 cap and I've got a property here that's a 7 cap, which would I like? Well, I would want the 7 cap if that's truly what it was, because I would earn a bigger return. The higher the return, usually the more risk that's involved. In California and Los Angeles specifically, I don't know where y'all are, but we have there's the cat. We have a very low vacancy rate. Most apartment owners can stick a sign in their front yard and get their unit rented in a week or 2. So because the vacancy rate is so low, the cap rate is also compressed and buildings are a lot more expensive here. When the eviction moratorium went into place nationally and in California, you couldn't give away apartment buildings for a while because people didn't want to buy properties where the tenants didn't have to pay rent and they couldn't do anything about it. So the market got really slow. I had a building for sale. It took a year start to finish to sell it. We went on the market right after COVID. We closed it just this last April with 6 units. And because who wants to buy a property where the tenant can literally stop paying you rent and you can't evict them? So everything kind of got held up from that. And our cap rates went up, meaning the properties got cheaper. As seller wants a low cap rate, a buyer wants a high cap rate. Okay, so what you have to know about a cap rate is it helps you compare two different or multiple different properties together, and it calculates in the expenses and the rents and looks at how it would perform if you were paying cash for it, in which case you wouldn't use Natalie. These are all gross scheduled income, gross potential income, and gross effective income. There's 4 levels of income when you look deep into the underwriting process. For the sake of this presentation, we're gonna simplify it, but these are different levels of income, where one is the potential of what you could get, one is what you're actually currently getting, one is calculating vacancy in, and then another is calculating all of those things plus any extra income that comes in. Okay, so not important to know those, but these are income before vacancy and other income. We're going to talk about gross operating income. That's the money that you're left with to run the property after vacancy and after you collected laundry money or an extra couple $100 for a garage. So this is all income sources. Actually, depending on who's looking at it in the analysis, vacancy may or may not be a part of the gross operating income. Vacancy is typically not considered an expense, but it has to be calculated into an analysis. So we generally take it off the income versus calling it an expense. Then we've got ROI. That's the big one, also called IRR, which is internal rate of return. This is, if I'm going to make a $100,000 investment, what percentage of what am I going to make on that money? I know I can take it over to Chase Bank and earn 0.1% on my savings account. Maybe I can put it in the stock market and earn 5 or 6% in a mutual fund. What am I going to earn in real estate? And this is going to take into consideration my loan, the expenses of the property, the rents. You all know that we have rent stabilization in Los Angeles and a lot of parts of California now. That can hold rents down drastically, which devalues properties. And buyers who find the right property and own the property long enough can capitalize on when those low rent paying tenants move out or die or move in with family or go to assisted living or get married and combine households, and they leave an apartment that's below market. And you have the opportunity to potentially double the rent, sometimes even more in rent stabilization areas. So the ROI is, what are you really going to earn on this money? It's like looking forward. If you tell me you'll show me you can make me 15% on my 100 grand and you're going to guarantee it, great. I'm looking ahead. In retrospect, after the year is up and I look back at how it performed, I'm sorry, let me jump back. A return on investment is your expected return on your acquisition cost. So that's your down payment and your cost to close, which if you're a buyer is going to include title and escrow fees, lender fees, when you don't have to pay the commission side. And then we've got return on equity. This is my favorite one. This is the one that people don't always know about and they don't think about it. This is after the year has gone by. You told me I could earn 15% on my 100 grand, and we're sitting at a year and I look back at how much I earned on my 100 grand. This is where we look backwards. Okay. This is, if you put my very first investment property, I put $11,700 down because I bought a $117,000 house. It wasn't here. I put 10% down. At the time, you could get a 10% investment loan. Put down $11,700 plus some closing costs. So let's call it 12,500. Let's call it $13,000. Today, the property is worth like $250,000. So is it fair to look at the revenue I make in cash flow on that property and how much it's gone up in value and compare that to the 11,700 or 13 grand I spent 20 years ago, 19 or 20 years ago? No, it's not, because that was 20-year ago money. And that's not the reality anymore. It's spent and it's gone. What I need to look at is, what is my equity in the property? If I were to sell it, and you can calculate equity by, looking at what you have is what it's worth minus what you owe, or it's what it's worth minus what you owe minus your cost to sell it. So if I wanted to sell one property and get into another and it's going to cost me 6 or 7% to sell it, I might deduct that from the equity that I have in it. And I come up with, so that $11,700, which was my equity on day one, now that equity is probably $150,000. Now I have to compare the income I'm getting on that property to the $150,000 that I could get out of that property if I wanted to. And that's very important, because if you look at your investments, many of them, especially people in the Los Angeles area or California in general, are not earning what they think they're earning. You might be getting a couple $1,000s a month in cash flow and you might be really happy with that. But if I show you that it's only 4.5%, it might make you think about what else is there that I could earn much more than 4.5% on. Okay. And the magic number in California is about 3 to 5% that people are earning on their properties, whether they have a loan or not. Okay. So these people that have properties that are paid for, that are worth $1 million now, and they bought it for $100,000, 20, 30 years ago, they've got $1 million in equity potentially in that property. And if it's a rental, you have to compare your income against the $1 million in equity. And you're probably making a couple, 3%. Now there's ways to change that. One is you sell that property, you get into something that performs better. And that is, if you do it through an exchange, there's no taxes on it if you follow the guidelines. Separate presentation, we're not going to talk about that. Or you can borrow money out of that property and go buy another investment property and have the money work for you. And oftentimes, it not only will the investment property pay for the money, the loan on the money you borrowed out, but it puts additional money in your pocket. Now, when you get to a certain point in life or a certain age, my parents have paid their house off, and I say to them all the time, "Why are you letting that money just sit there?" Oh, we don't want the hassle. Not everybody is always trying to grow, right? They're happy, they're content. They don't want the hassle. They don't have a mortgage payment. It took them a long time to pay off their house. They've been there 35 years. It's enough. But when I was younger, I was all about growth and wealth accumulation. Now I'm a little bit older. I've got a family I'm supporting. Now the cash flow is important too. And I'll throw this in here because I'm not sure it's in the presentation later. Never buy a property based on the expectation of appreciation or the tax benefits. If there are CPAs out there that'll tell you to go buy a property, you need the deductions. Okay, that's great, but you want to make sure it supports itself, because if you buy a property that's losing money just for the deductions, you'd be better off not buying it all and not losing money. So it's important to know that a property needs to have enough income from it to support itself. And that's the big difference between residential and commercial, is the bank will loan you money to buy a 1 to 4 unit property, even if the mortgage is going to be $2,000 more than the rent that you collect. As long as you make enough money, your credit score is high enough, and you have enough assets. A commercial bank will never give you a loan on a property that loses money every month. So they're always going to make sure the property supports itself. They're going to look at the property first, then they're going to look at your finances and figure out what kind of risk they can take. In residential, they're going to look at you first, and then the property second, for lack of a better explanation. And that's where a lot of people got into trouble back in 07, 08, 09, when they bought these properties that you didn't need much documentation for to get a loan. They were losing money or they were making money, but as soon as something went wrong, people were upside down and losing money, and they let millions of properties go across the country. So that return on equity, I kind of went off subject there. It's the return on your current equity, looking back or looking at what it's actually earning for you today. And an investment you made 6 months ago, you can still look at your rate of your return on investment. But an investment you made 6 years ago, forget it. What you put into that is not the important factor when it comes to analyzing how it's performing for you. If I bought my house for $25,000 down and I sell it and put $300,000 in my pocket, that's a pretty great profit, depending on how many years it was. But it doesn't tell you how that property is performing today. It just says, hey, I made some money. All right. Hope I'm not going too fast and I'm looking at my clock. Okay. I think I got like 15 more minutes. Candace, yes, no?
Your timing is okay. We're really informal with this.
Okay.
I guess we're saving Q&A for the end, but yeah, no
Well,
pressure.
why don't I stop there and
Yes.
see if anybody has any questions
So far.
so far.
Any
No,
questions?
don't stop, Bruce. Go for it.
Wow, Bill, you're the voice of God there. Okay.
Well, my wife is next to me and we're in echo mode.
All right. So here we go. Let's look at some of the things we need to look at when we analyze a property. We always know what the rents are. They're always on the table. They're in the MLS, or they're in a rent roll, or they're in a brochure. But we also have other income to consider too. So that's things like laundry. Now, most landlords that provide laundry, I'm not talking about a washer dryer in the unit. I'm talking about a laundry room where they put money in. You're lucky if you make enough money from either your machines or the vendor who's providing them for you to cover the extra water and electricity. They're not generally big money unless you own a laundromat. They're more of a selling point. Hey, tenants don't want to go to the laundromat. They can walk downstairs and use this laundry room, for $1 or $2 a load. It's my experience is they're not big money makers. I had a 4-unit building once. I think I got $30 one month, and other months I got nothing. And then when the nice thing was they broke, so I didn't have to fix them, but I was paying the water bill and the electric for them. Storage. A lot of people have storage facilities where they rent their garages out for storage. There is nothing that says that just because you have garages, you have to give them to the tenants that are in your building. It certainly lets you get higher rent when you're offering a garage, although all the old buildings in the Los Angeles area that were built in the 20s or 30s, if you've ever looked at a Model T or an old car from the 20s or 30s, they're about this wide and this long. And you can't pull most cars into those garages today and be able to open your door. So a lot of people aren't parking in garages on older units. This is more for commercial. Cell towers bring in money, billboards bring in money, parking. I've seen landlords that charge for, hey, I've got 4 parking spaces in the back. Whoever wants to give me $50 a month can have one. Otherwise, you're on the street. Okay, those are other income. Fiber, that's more for a commercial property. I had a landlord once that he bootlegged his cable and offered it to his tenants for like $25 a month, and basically he lived in the building too, and he got his cable paid for by his tenants, legal or not. I'm not going to comment. All right, so the net operating expense. This is the big number. This is the number that is you collect your rent, you pay your expenses, and this is what you're left with. Now, keep in mind your mortgage is not an expense formally when we look at how to underwrite a property. It does cost you money, and you do have to write the check, but it's not considered an expense. We look at how the property performs after all the expenses, and we get the NOI, and then your mortgage or your debt service is paid from that remaining number. Okay, so I got 2 tiers here for basically 2 types of investors. A mom and pop investor that's going to operate their own property, and they're very informal, and they're not really conservative, and they're not really wanting to make sure that they're okay no matter what. And then people that are going to be either more sophisticated or more conservative or a little bit more detailed. Okay, everybody needs to look at these things. You have your gross potential income. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. What the heck I think I have a rogue slide in there. Sorry about that. Okay, so forgive me, we're going to calculate the net operating income. We're going to take our gross potential income, how much we could earn if everyone was in the units paying the rent they're supposed to pay. And we're going to subtract a vacancy factor for it. Most parts of the country, you're going to use 10-ish%. Here in California, we're going to probably use 5 or less. Some banks will even allow you to use 2.5%, but that's probably not for 1 to 4 units. That's going to leave us with our gross operating income. Then we're going to subtract all of our expenses. We're going to talk about expenses. So the comment I just made about the different tiers, that's related to expenses. Then we're going to add back in any reimbursements. The tenants pay you back for water or cable or something like that. CAM fees are a commercial thing. And that's going to give us our NOI, our net operating income. That's the magic number. That does not include your debt service or your tax benefits. Keep that in mind. The cap rate, for those interested, you take your net operating income and you divide it by the price and value. So or the value. So for example, if you take $100,000 net operating income and you divide it by $1 million property, you're going to end up with a 10 cap. You're not going to find a 10 cap in California. So if you probably, and if you do, you probably don't want it. So if you take $100,000 in revenue and you divide it by in net income, not revenue, but net income after all your expenses, you divide it by a $2 million value, you're going to end up with a 5% cap rate. Okay. So you can always calculate when you know the NOI and you know the asking price, you can always calculate what kind of cap rate that is. And you can compare properties. If you know that apartments in LA that are 6 units plus are selling for a 4.5 cap in this particular neighborhood, and this one's priced at a 3 cap, even though they don't tell you it's a 3 cap, you know you're overpaying for the property more than likely, or there's a bunch of really low rent paying tenants in there, and the landlord doesn't want to give up all the value that will come when they finally move out. All right, so that's going to equal your cap rate. Net income divided by your price or your value. And your cap rate is a yield. It's what you're earning on the property. So here's the expenses we were talking about. Everybody needs to consider tier 1 expenses on a property, even if it's a single family home and you moved out of it to somewhere else and you're renting it. I haven't had time to have a sip of my drink. Property taxes. We all pay them. Insurance. You're not required to have insurance unless you have a loan, but you should have insurance. Utilities. Maybe our tenants are paying them. Maybe we're paying some. If it's a single family and you're leasing it to somebody, they're probably paying all the utilities. If it's a 4-unit apartment building, you're probably paying water, trash, and sewer, and they're probably paying their own electric and gas. So calculate your utilities. Landscaping. Even if you don't have grass, you're still going to have to do some cleanup. There's still going to be things that need to happen. There's going to be landscaping expense to some degree. It might be $50 a month, and it might be $300 a month, depending on how much grass you have and what's involved. Repair and maintenance, keeping in mind that whatever the seller tells you they've spent on repair and maintenance is completely bogus. It doesn't matter. If they did nothing to the property and it's run down, then they didn't spend very much on repair and maintenance. If they've done a bunch of work last year and they've got this huge repair and expense maintenance number, and now there's probably not going to be problems going forward. Okay. And we don't know how everyone calculates their own numbers, but when you look at a property, always believe that what the seller's telling you is complete baloney and you're going to figure it out on your own. Not that they're trying to deceive you, but you'll see when we go to tier 2 that not everything is included in tier 1 that should be. Vacancy. A lot of people are putting properties on the market and they're not accounting for any vacancy. And that's important. You have to put a vacancy factor in there. So if you have a house and you have a vacancy of 1 month, you have an 8%, roughly 8.33% vacancy rate. If you have a duplex and tenants move out after a year and it takes you a month to clean it up and get it rented, and you've lost 1 tenant, you have a 4.3% or 4.15% vacancy rate. If 2 tenants do that, you have an 8.3% vacancy rate. So it's important to calculate it in there. If someone lives there for 3 years and you have a 0 vacancy rate on that unit, but then they move out, and I have some properties in some cold weather country, and if I lose a tenant on October 31st, there's a good chance, unless I'm offering some super big special, that I'm empty until February. Because who wants to move over Thanksgiving? Who wants to move over Christmas? And it takes a while for people to kind of get back in the swing of things. So January 1st, no one's given notice. So the next time they have to give notice is maybe February 1, looking to move somewhere around March 1. And you need to calculate that, because there's certain times where if you go vacant, not in California, but in other markets, where you'll be vacant longer. All right, tier 2. These are when you start looking a little deeper. Some of these are for commercial, but capital reserves. This is really important. Now, your banker might make you calculate this, but what if you have to replace an air conditioning unit and it's $5,000? That's not a repair or a maintenance issue. That's a capital expense. And the IRS is going to make you capitalize that. You're not going to get to write it all off in 1 year, depending on how aggressive your CPA is. But you need to plan for expenses that are unexpected. What happens when your roof goes bad? If you move into a house and there's 5 years left on the roof and it's going to cost you $10,000 to replace the roof, you better be packing away $2,000 a year so that in 5 years you have the money to replace the roof. And the capital reserves, gets overlooked way too often, and it's oftentimes what gets people in trouble, because your tenants will move out if you don't fix. I have a property in Phoenix, Arizona. If I don't have an air conditioning unit, my tenant's going to leave, and if I have to spend $5,000 to replace it, what's my choice? Wait until winter time when the weather's beautiful and try to rent it again? Then they'll leave anyway. You have a question? Okay, I think that was no. I'm lip reading. Exterior maintenance. Keep in mind, we're going to paint our property.
You
We're going
can,
to power wash our property. We're going to maybe have to do some stucco repair, but we're definitely going to have some exterior maintenance to the property at some point. Janitorial, that's commercial. Okay. Are you going to have management? I am a property owner. I am not a landlord. I do not know any of my tenants. I have never signed a lease. I have never shown one of my properties, even when I had them local, right? So my properties are in various places, but I put someone else in that position. I do not want to get a phone call in the middle of the night telling me my water heater's leaking or my toilet's clogged. So I'm a property owner. If you're a landlord and you're taking those calls, you're going to save the management fee, which is on residential is going to probably be between 4 and 8% in most markets. May or may not include a leasing fee, which is coming up. And if you're managing it yourself, that's great. But what happens if you're injured, incapacitated, you relocate, you decide you don't want to manage it anymore? I would tell you to look at the property, factor in management, even if you're going to do it yourself, so you know how it performs. Accounting, licensing and permits. We have to register our units here in LA. Fire safety, we've got fire extinguisher costs, and we have smoke detector and carbon monoxide detectors. Advertising, we don't have to do a lot of it in Los Angeles, but some places we do. Broker commissions. Okay, myself, Candace, David, we're real estate brokers. Most people are not using a real estate broker to lease their local properties, but when you do, it's going to cost you about 6 to 10%. I pay my leasing fees. I pay between 6 and 8% across the country to the people that are leasing my properties. And then I pay a renewal fee. If I don't calculate those into my expenses, I'm not going to have an accurate number when I project how is this property going to perform. You have a 2-story building and you have an elevator. Those are expensive to maintain. Is there security, whether it's a security system or a security person? Is there, by the way, going back to management, on or off site, if you buy 15 or 16 units in California, you're required to have an on-site manager. And you can pay them or you can give them a rent reduction, but it's still going to be an expense to you. And then you're also going to have management expenses on the outside, because your on-site manager is not, they're collecting rent and taking maintenance requests. They're not doing your books for you generally. There's legal evictions. What do evictions cost you? Not only lost rent and damage when you recover the unit, but what's the legal fee? Is it $700-800 every time you do an eviction? You better calculate some of that in, because it's going to happen. Although during COVID, everyone got a free ride. Okay. Depreciation, I'm not going to go too deep into it, but this is a freebie that the government gives you because they want you to own real estate. They want you to own investment real estate, because if they take away some of the benefits of investment real estate, people like you and I are not going to buy investment real estate. We're not going to get the same benefits from it. And what's going to happen when there's no rental properties? We're going to have a bigger homeless problem. I'm not trying to be political. Or our government's going to be in charge of creating housing for people, and they can't keep up with the demand they currently have, let alone knowing. So there's huge benefits to real estate investors. That's why we've had the 1031 in exchange for 100 years, got written into law in 1921. We've got depreciation, which is a paper loss. It's a book value loss. So residential property of any size, 100 units or 2 units or 1 unit, 27.5 years, you take the improved value of the house and divide it by 27.5 years, and you can take that lump sum amount as a deduction against your rents. You can also, it can drop you into a loss position on your property when you're not really losing money, but the government acknowledges it as if you're losing money. And it might actually offset your earned income. Okay, if you are under a certain income level and you show a loss in real estate, I'm not a CPA, but the last I heard, if you made up to $100,000 adjusted gross income as a couple or a family or an individual, you could deduct up to $25,000 in passive loss on your real estate against your actual earned income. And once you hit 100,000, it starts tapering down until you get to 150. And after that, you can't deduct any more than $3,000 a year, which is a standard passive loss bucket the IRS gives you. I'm not a CPA, consult your CPA, even though I probably know what I'm talking about. Okay, so that's something to look at too, but we don't want to, whether we calculate the depreciation into how's this property really performing for us or not is up to you. I like a property to perform well based on its rent and its cash flows and its debt service without depreciation, because then I know it's only going to do better with depreciation. If I depreciate $20,000 a year, I don't have to pay taxes on $20,000. That's going to save me $6,000 to $8,000 a year out of my pocket. So having that depreciation allows me to keep more of my money instead of sending it to the government. There's something called cost segregation, which is an accelerated depreciation, but it's expensive, probably $5,000 to $10,000 minimum, and it's probably not worth doing on an investment that's under a couple $1 million. But bigger properties, it's an accelerated schedule. When you do a new air conditioning system or a new roof, can't write it all off in 1 year. The IRS will determine a scale, like 10 years for a roof, which means you spend $10,000 on a roof, you can deduct $1,000 a year. But that's also why we need that that capital reserve money. 1031, there's a push right now to do away with the 1031. There's going to be a lot of lobbying against it. If you don't know what a 1031 is, it's a way to sell a rental property, buy another investment property, and pay no taxes on it if you do it within their guidelines. You don't have to spend. It's not like the old days. People think, oh, I have to buy something that's more, I have to buy it with cash. There's some guidelines, but basically if you sell $1 million property and you don't want to pay any taxes, you probably have to invest about $950 into a new property to pay no taxes. If you had a loan, you have to put a loan on the new property, or you have to put the cash in, but you can't take cash out, put it in your pocket and not pay taxes on it. And you can do a partial 1031 too. I've had people say, look, I need to buy that Winnebago. I'm keeping the 150 grand. Great. You'll pay taxes on that at your capital gains expense. And you will pay taxes on the recaptured depreciation, whether you take it or not. I am personally responsible for probably getting 10 to 20 CPAs fired over the last few years. When I look at someone's tax return and say, where's your depreciation on your rental property? And they say, oh, my CPA said I didn't need the write-off. Guess what happens when you sell that property? The IRS says, well, it was taken or allowed or allowable, I forget is the term, and you didn't take it, but we're going to pretend you did, and we're going to charge you taxes on that amount. You have to now pay taxes. So you can only go back and amend your tax return so far. So if your CPA doesn't understand investment real estate and you're not taking depreciation, whether you need it or not, you're gonna be in trouble when you sell it. Now, if you don't use it, it just saves up and it goes to offset any tax liability you have when you do sell it. So make sure you take it. And hopefully I'll get another CPA fired out of this. I'm gonna skip this. There is the before and after tax way to look at this, which is important, okay, because we're all going to be in different tax situations. What's deductible? Almost everything. Travel to your rental property, legal related to your rental property, commissions related to your rental property, all direct expenses against that property. Well, my parents live in Scottsdale, Arizona. I own property in Arizona. If I fly to Arizona to visit my parents and I drop by and take pictures of my property or meet with my property manager, can I deduct that trip? I don't know. I'm not a CPA, but I'll bet a lot of you could, and your CPAs would bless it. So I always ask people, when you're investing, is there a place you travel to a lot? Or do you have a child going to college and maybe you want to buy something where they're going to college that they could live in? Or where do you want to retire? Things like that. Here's the lending. I think this will segue into some Q&A and Natalie. 1 to 4 units, you're typically going to put down 25%. And your personal income and your personal credit, your personal assets are key. In 5+ in a commercial property, the property has to be profitable to get a loan. Otherwise, you're talking hard money, and you're talking 8%, 9% minimum on hard money, up to maybe 15. Your debt coverage ratio has to be there, and that's a number that a bank will give somewhere between 1.1 and 1.3, depending on the property. That assures that when you take your NOI and you pay your debt service, you're going to have a cushion of profit. So the bank's not going to allow you to borrow an amount of money that's going to cost you your entire NOI. They typically want a 20% cushion. So the 1.2 means a 20% commission or cushion. It means if you have $100,000 in NOI, they're basically going to allow you to have $80,000 a year in, or probably 82, 83 in debt expense, even though some of that debt expense is not an expense. Interest is an expense. Principal reduction is not an expense. And it's money you're taking out of one pocket, putting it into the next. California, we have high appreciation, very low cash flow percentage most of the time. If you buy in California, you're not buying for the cash flow. We go to other places, we get better cash flow, but we get slower appreciation. I have a friend in Houston that likes to joke that up until recently, you could buy a house in Houston, pay it off over 30 years and sell it for exactly what you bought it for. And it wouldn't cost you any tax. It wouldn't cost, you'd put all the money in your pocket, but it wouldn't cost you anything in taxes because there was no gain. So other places are slower. However, they get better cash flow. So I'm curious, what would a comparison look like buying in LA, earning 2% cash flow with good appreciation versus buying in Iowa with 8% cash flow and 3% appreciation? I don't know, but over time, it's closer than you might think. And so people in other parts of the country are generally not investing in California. And they look at us like we're crazy to be buying these properties. Now, I'm not trying to shoot myself and David and Candace in the foot, but we like to own property where we live, and we get good appreciation in California. So, and we have opportunities to buy at the dips or buy distressed properties and really create value out of them. So that's why California is a good place to invest. You can add value. I'm going to go super fast here. You can increase the revenue. You can reduce your expenses. You can do capital improvements, which will increase your revenue. Hey, Mr. Tenant, if I put in air conditioning for you, will you pay me $150 more in rent? That's $1,800 a year. If you spend $5,000 putting an air conditioning in and you make $1,800 a year off of it, that's a 36% return on your investment. It's worth it. Garages, storage, I didn't put air conditioning in there, but you know, I've had people build garages because they can rent them out. Leverage, there's positive and negative leverage. Really quick, when you borrow money, depending on the interest rate, you're either better off borrowing money or you're better off paying cash. If the interest rate is lower than the return you're going to get on the property, or it's lower than the cap rate, then you have positive leverage and you're better off borrowing money because you're using the bank's money to get wealthy. If interest rates are 10 and cap rates are 5 and you borrow money, it's going to cost you more to borrow the money. So you have to consider, if I had the cash to do it, should I do it or should I borrow the money? Okay. Some people they're just debt averse. If you're super debt averse, real estate, you're not going to get the advantages of that real estate really has to offer, because the real way to make money is by leveraging. You'll make money if you pay cash for a property and it goes up in value, but you'll make more money if you put a loan in place. So your cash in basically earns your cap rate. Your loan amount earns the arbitrage. And this is complicated and I do a whole different class on this, but your arbitrage is, let's say the cap rate on my apartment building is 7. I'm buying it at, let's say, a 7 cap, and I'm borrowing money from Natalie at 4%. I'm taking Natalie's money at 4%, and I'm buying a property that's earning 7%. So I earn the 7%, I pay Natalie the 4%, and I'm earning 3%. And it wasn't even my money, other people's money, right? So I'm earning wealth. Now that doesn't equate to cash flow. That equates to cash flow and or debt pay down or equity buildup, okay? Because when you pay a mortgage, you're paying interest and you're paying principal, and that chunk is enough money where your cash flow will be less than if you actually paid cash for the property, but you're taking money out of one pocket and you're putting it into the equity of your property. So if you can borrow money, and rates are ridiculously low right now, and it's lower than the cap rate. Now, when apartment buildings were at 3.5% and 4% in LA, and you were borrowing money at 4%, there wasn't a huge benefit to borrowing the money other than I don't have enough money to buy it. There wasn't a positive leverage scenario. Now that rates have gone up on the cap and people are buying apartments for 4.5% to 6%, and the banks are still loaning money at 3.5% and 4% or less in some scenarios, now you're making money by borrowing money. And so it's kind of a perfect storm. Positive leverage can earn you up to twice the cap rate. You can buy a property that's a 6 cap and earn 12% all in on it as an IRR if you have the right loan in place. And so the cap rate doesn't tell the story, as we talked about. The world is the GRM, looking at California maybe as the cap rate, and looking at Hollywood might be your actual IRR. We have to kind of drill down. Not going to go through this, not going to do that. Questions? How do you want to do questions, Candace, if there are any?
Oh my God, that was so deep, thorough, and comprehensive.
I'm going to have a sip of my drink right now.
A lot of information there, a lot to digest. Anybody have any questions?
I must say, I thank you so much for all that information. That was really, there's a lot of stuff I did not know about, and thank you for enlightening me. So very much appreciated.
All right. It's fun. I'm passionate. As I said, I do primarily tenant rep in my business, but what I'm really passionate about, what got me into real estate, was the investment side. It's investment real estate that theoretically could allow me to retire very soon. When your passive income can replace your earned income, you're in a position where you can retire and not change your quality of life. Separate from, you don't want to wait around for your relatives to leave you money, and you don't want to count on that corporation to give you the big raise. And real estate over time, if you start investing early enough, and it's never too late, but the earlier you start, I owned my first rental property when I was 25, and it became a rental property because I moved from San Diego to Los Angeles, and the market was crappy in 1996. And I couldn't sell the property. I was going to lose money. So I rented it, and I lost money every month. And eventually I couldn't do it anymore. So I sold it at a loss for $115,000. And when I went back 5 years ago, some of my old neighbors that I remembered from 1996 were telling me how these properties were now selling in the 475 range.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
Nobody has ever said, I should have sold more real estate. They generally say, I should have bought more real estate and I should have held on to it. And when you do sell it, it needs to be for a specific reason. If you're taking the money out, you're going to pay the taxes. If you're not taking the money out and you're going to exchange it, it needs to be because you're bettering your position. You're creating more wealth, and you can avoid paying taxes as long as we have the 1031 in place. You will never pay taxes until you exceed the federal inheritance law limit, which right now is $22 million as a couple. So unless your assets are $22 million, even though you had never paid taxes on these properties that you exchange, your heirs will get them tax-free. Now, obviously that 22 million, that used to be as low as 1 million, and it's going to go way back down, but most people don't crack the,
right?
What's that?
Wasn't it at 15 for a while?
It was, well, there's what we call the George Steinbrenner year. The year that George Steinbrenner, owner of the Yankees, died as a billionaire, there was no limit on, for like 1 year, there was no, I still wonder if his family had anything to do with it, zero limit. And he left $1 billion to his family tax-free, even if he sheltered the taxes through his whole life on that revenue. And had he liquidated that stuff, he would have had to pay taxes on it. When he passed and he left it to his heirs, there were no taxes. So yes, the limit's going to drop. We think it might drop back down to the $5 to $11 million range where it was a few years ago before Trump changed it to $11 million a person. It was like $5 million a person. We don't know. And I wouldn't make your decisions based on what we think is going to happen to the tax laws. Every time they mess with real estate, the NAR, the National Association of Realtors, which is one of the biggest lobbying groups around, gets in. There's a lot of jobs that are at stake. Unions get involved. There are about 40 people involved in a real estate transaction. So if real estate transactions shrink and investors aren't taking their money out of one property and buying another one, everything stops. The economy stops, and real estate's a huge part of the economy. So there's going to be a lot of fighting against getting rid of it altogether. I think we're probably going to see some limitations on it. Capital gains, this whole capital gains thing where we pay 15%, 20% if you make over 450,000 adjusted gross a year, that's new. That came into place in, I think, 1986. There were no capital gains before. You sold your house, you paid your tax rate on it. So capital gains saved people a lot of money. And I don't think we're going to see that go away, hopefully, but that's, there's a lot of ways to make money in real estate. That's another, I keep thinking of these things that are other classes, but any other questions specific to that fire hose of information I just spewed at you guys?
May I ask a question?
You bet.
Yeah. There are these ADUs that are the accessory dwelling units that can go in with homes, but they're also applicable to income properties. I'm an architect, and I was wondering if there's been any analysis as to the benefit of converting parking to ADUs or storage to ADUs to create more.
I think it's simple enough. If you have a house and you add the legality of whether you can add an ADU, it's not something I'm going to speak on, but if you have a house and you add an ADU and you're living there, you've got a partial rental property. It's like buying a duplex and living in one of the units. If it's a rental property, it's a house and you add an ADU, keep in mind that no one's going to pay as much rent for a house that has another unit in it as it would if it was just a house with privacy.
Yeah,
Okay.
but my question is regarding apartment buildings. They are also capable of converting accessory spaces into ADUs. Has there been any analysis to see if that makes sense? In other words, take parking away and creating more units?
Well, it'd be a really simple analysis, which would be, okay, number one, can you take the parking away? Because if your leases give the parking to tenants, you can't take it away until the tenant moves out and you get a new lease in place, unless they agree. If I'm earning $100 a month for 4 parking spaces and I can build an ADU in that space, it's going to earn me $1,000 a month. I'd rather have the ADU, but you have to look at the fact that you're going to lose $100 a month, and the tenants that can't buy parking there, are they going to want to pay less rent, or is it less desirable? It's very simple. You can look at what the rent would be. In a lot of cases, it would be worthwhile, especially if the city lets you do it. But if you end up with so many people on top of each other, it's not as desirable of a building to live in. And if they have nowhere to park, and keeping in mind, an ADU is an accessory dwelling unit. It doesn't have to be a converted space. It can be a converted garage. It can be a converted pool house. It can be a dropped in with a crane, all ready to go thing, or it can be built from the ground up. And it doesn't have the setback requirements that units have. So it's all designed to create more housing for people. We thought about it for our house, and I kind of ran the numbers, and I'm like, yeah, it'd be great, but I don't want to have a tenant. And if I'm selling my house, I think I'll get more for my house without one than I would if I had my house with an ADU, because a homeowner, unless they have a parent or an in-law that's going to come, or a guest house, they can always build it themselves. And you just have to run the numbers and see what it's going to cost. You can do garage conversions for around 75 grand in a lot of places, and have a nice studio apartment. I don't know what the drop-ins one costs, but my garage at my house is incredibly valuable. Where would I keep all my crap if I didn't have my garage? So, Janet.
Jeanette.
I think you have to unmute.
Yes, so I have a question. Thanks, Bruce. It was a great presentation, very informative. I live in Sierra Madre. It's a little small town.
Yep.
And there's
Lots of bears.
yeah, exactly. There's a commercial property that's in foreclosure, and one of the tenants who owns a computer shop wants to buy it, but he keeps asking me, well, what would be the value? Because we really don't have anything to compare it with.
One of the tenants that does what wants to buy it?
One of the tenants that rents there, he owns a computer repair business.
Okay.
And there's a laundromat. There's about, I think it's about 12 tenants there.
So it's a strip mall. It's a retail property.
Kind of, yeah. Yeah, it is. And he just keeps asking, well, what would be the value? And I keep telling him, well, I think it's because we can't get a value in Sierra Madre because it's only population 10,000. That's our only, we don't have any strip malls or anything. So we can't really get a price for it other than getting.
Sure you can. Well, it's a commercial property, so you're going to use a little bit of a different analysis to determine the value. I've done leases in Sierra Madre right there on, what's the main street that goes right through the cute downtown?
Sierra Madre Boulevard.
Yeah, so there's I put a bike shop in there that's now a candy store. You probably know the property I'm talking about.
It's not there anymore.
Well, the bike shop's not there. That was a neighbor.
There's the candy shop.
Candy store, and it had a karate place next door. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
You can value anything anywhere just because there aren't other. So appraisers like to go in and look at value, and they like to find a property that's similar and close. Okay. For residential, they like to stay within a quarter mile, half a mile. For commercial, they have to go farther to find those kind of properties. So properties are valued on their cash flow and their income stream in commercial. They're not valued on what the property next door sold for. So for example, you can have an 8-unit apartment building and an 8-unit apartment building, and they look exactly the same, and they were built the same by the same contractor. And this one has $1,000 a month rent, and this one has $1,200 a month rent. That extra $200 a month times 8 is $1,600, is about $19,000 a year. That's going to add about $400,000 in value difference to the one that has the $1,200 in rent. Now that, don't ask me how I did that, but that's not true for a 4-unit because the income does not affect the value. It affects the desirability. So when we look at a strip mall, we look at the income, we look at the expenses, we look at what are the cap rates for similar types of properties in similar areas, and that's how you value it. So I'd be curious because there's not a lot of commercial foreclosures. And one of the reasons is banks do not allow investors to leverage themselves to the extent that residential loans banks will. So I'd be curious to look at, are you a real estate agent?
I am.
Okay, I'm happy to talk to you about it. It sounds interesting, and that's a very desirable area. I'm just surprised to hear there's actual foreclosure going in there, because usually they don't owe that much money and they don't need to go into foreclosure. They don't even need to do a short sale. They can just sell, unlike some of us with houses. So.
Right. Well, I've talked to the owner as well, so I'll put my information on the chat box. So
Don't do that. If you want to ask me about it, email me. And otherwise, here's my info again.
Okay.
Yeah, don't put the chat in because I won't see it afterwards.
Okay.
All right, Tyler, thank you.
I know you have to leave, Bruce, but we do have one more question from Tyler, who's raising his hand. I can read it, Tyler, but if there's something different, let us know. Tyler wanted to know, where are you finding properties that are still earning 4.5 to 6 cap rate?
Well, that's not here anymore. It used to be, I mean, are we talking about apartment buildings? Because it just depends on, every asset class has a different kind of range of cap rates that it's going for. Tyler, you want to unmute and ask her?
Yeah, I was specifically asking about apartment buildings.
1 to 4 units or 5 units plus?
5 plus.
Okay, so the last apartment building I sold was in a very desirable part of Highland Park, walking distance to York and 50th, where all the cool restaurants and bars are. And it was a 5-unit. It was a craftsman home in front that had a 4-unit built behind it in the 50s. It was legally a 5-unit building. We had it on the market for a 5.7 cap rate, and it took us a year to sell. And it had 2 off-street parking spaces per unit. And it was walking distance to transportation and walking distance to everything you could possibly want. And because of what was going on with the eviction moratorium, nobody wanted it. So we eventually sold it at, I think it was about a 5.8 cap. So they're out there. They're out there, and you have to look at, if you're looking at an area with rent stabilization. A lot of people say, I don't want anything to do with rent control. I'm not going to let the city tell me what I can do. You're missing opportunities, because some of those properties, as you walk through them and you realize people have been living there for 20, 30, 40 years and they're elderly, they will eventually move somewhere else. And when they move, you spend a few $1,000s upgrading that unit. Sometimes you can triple the rent. So I don't see 4 to 6 being impossible here in LA. I used to be, you get apartment buildings, they were in the 3s. But I don't want to buy at 6%. I'd rather buy at 7 or 8%, because then when I put a loan in place, I'm going to make 10 to 12%. It just depends. Everyone's got their own investment philosophy, but I don't think it's hard to find 4.5 to 6% on apartment buildings. And if it isn't, then I haven't looked at that market in the last 60 days, because that's not really what I'm in, but there's still an eviction moratorium in place. I can't imagine it's jumped back down to the 3% rates that they used to be at. Hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you.
There's another hand up, but I don't see a name on it in my screen.
There's nobody there. It's just me.
Oh, it's Echo Man. Echo Man. All right.
Yeah, Psycho Man.
Echo.
And if I don't talk, everybody gets angry. What I really wanted to know was, based on projected rent, first of all, I loved your presentation.
Oh, there you go. Now I can hear you.
Yeah, okay. My wife shut hers off. And so based on projected rent, how much can you afford? How many months worth of improvements can you do in a specific unit if you say you're gonna own it for 5 years? So let's say that the place is only earning $1,000 a month. You need to put 20,000 into it.
Well,
Is that it?
You
Is
mean
that worth it?
it's earning 1,000 or it will earn 1,000 once you put 20 into it?
No, it's currently earning 1,000,
Okay,
but
why would you put
it's
20?
under rent control.
Well, you don't want to, this is the problem with rent control. It creates slumlords, for lack of a better term. If
My
you,
son is now a slumlord, by
Awesome.
the way.
if you, what motivation do you have for a tenant that's lived there for 10 years to replace their carpet, upgrade their kitchen and add air conditioning if you can't raise
None.
the rent?
Well, okay, there's, by the way, Bill, I have to interject because
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
involved.
you can go away, David.
Are you a slumlord too, David?
I'm not, but I am involved on the deal that his son is involved in. And so basically we had a Section 8 tenant in there at $1,400 a month.
Okay.
The place needs to be remodeled, let's say 30 grand worth of work. Yeah, you know, being conservative. And it could be raised to $2,650 market rent. So
What is the current rent?
14.
And it can go to 2,650?
Yeah.
How do you get the tenant out?
She
Jackhammer.
she breached her contract. So
Okay.
so she's
Ooh,
out.
that's really bad news on Section 8 because she's damaging her future. So
Yes.
It's a he, by the way.
okay.
And he can, Guido can take care of him.
Be really careful. I know we all joke about that, but that building that I just sold in Highland Park, there were 4 tenants in the back building. The owner who lived in the front house passed away after living there 60 years. The tenants in the back building were paying $500 to $800 for a 1-bedroom apartment in a prime neighborhood. We got them all out for between 15 and 20,000 a piece. They voluntarily left. And if someone voluntarily leaves, even if you're bribing them and you get it in writing, that is completely legal. And the housing board does not get involved in that. You might have a problem if you intimidate them or threaten to call immigration or something like that, because they'll come back and get the money. But bottom line is, we all like to joke about, we know a guy with a baseball bat, but you can get tenants out. There's lots of legal ways to do it. So the answer to your question, $20,000, what are you going to do with it?
Waste money.
Well, no, I mean, if you can't get the tenant out and they're paying $1,000 a month, the only repairs you have to do to that property are enough to pass. Are you in Los Angeles?
Yeah.
So enough to pass the annual or biannual inspections you have from the housing department.
Yeah.
You have to have heat, you have to have running water, and you have to have a solid floor and a solid roof. You do not have to have high. If you have a 70s kitchen that's just disgusting and horrible and ugly, doesn't matter. Your motivation will be when that tenant moves out. Okay, whether they've breached or whether you've bribed them out or whether they leave on their own, at that point, then you analyze, do I want to put 20 grand into this? How much more rent would you get if you put a new kitchen in? And you can do a kitchen and a bathroom in an apartment for 20 grand, easy.
Yeah.
New paint and carpet. How much more rent would you get? 1,000?
I think a bulldozer is the best solution after the guy moves out, or maybe while he's still there.
That might hurt your investment, but let's say you get $1,000 a month more. That's $12,000 a year in additional revenue. Would you spend $20,000 to earn $12,000 on it in 1 year?
No, I would not.
You wouldn't. That's a
No,
60%. I'll give you the money. That's a 60%
Okay,
return on
it's a
investment.
deal.
You're not going to
Absolutely.
spend the money at $1,000 rent, but if you can get $2,000 rent and you're going to spend 20 grand, you're earning 60% on your 20 grand. If you have an investment that earns that kind of return, I'd love to hear about it. Right. So sometimes they're no brainers like, yes, we want to do this. Plus, it also raises the whole value of your property.
I'll let you know. I'll let you know. I have one, but I'm not going to announce it here.
All right. Well, you know how to find me. Candace and David, are we, thank you for letting me
We're
go
done.
over.
Yes.
We can wrap
You
up.
have to
Thank
let
you
it
so
go.
much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Bruce. Great presentation.
Did
Great.
we lose Natalie?
I think we may have.
No, honey, I'm
Nope,
here.
there she is. There she
She's
is.
here.
Natalie, I didn't want to take your time.
No, it's fine. I mean, I love joining this, and everybody, we know each other now. We're like,
This
Awesome.
is how
Well, it
we
was my
roll.
first time, and it was lots of fun, and I got to open a new bottle of liquor, and thank you all for spending an
Cheers,
hour. of your time.
Bruce. Thank you so much.
You bet. I
We
got to
appreciate
jump.
your time.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Great job.
Hi.
I guess we're going.
Natalie, the floor is yours. What's going on in the world of mortgages?
Oh my goodness. Well, rates are still excellent. I know I say that when we get on, but they did kind of shift up a little about a month ago. And now we're back down again, back down in a huge way. I locked somebody on a jumbo loan at 2.6 the other day. So we're back down to really like pandemic rates, which is amazing. Now, I don't know how long that's going to last because the Fed keeps coming out with rumblings that they are going to stop feeding the market of MBS mortgage-backed securities, which they are buying every day. Like 50% of them, the Fed is buying. So it's like this fake inflation of who is actually purchasing these mortgage-backed securities to keep rates low. It's the Fed. And the Fed has decided that due to inflation numbers, they're most likely going to stop buying those mortgage-backed securities in the manner that they happen. So with that said, rates are, the moment they do that, rates will start shifting up because mortgage-backed securities, the purchases of them will go down. And then we'll see what happens. They are saying that they're not going to raise rates, the actual index rate, until I think 2022, probably later. But they're going to announce when they're starting to cut back on the MBSs, and then we'll see where rates go. But right now, they're still amazing, and new products are coming out, you guys. New 1-year tax return to $2 million with excellent rates on jumbo loans. I've got a jumbo investor that now is doing conventional financing. So it's, if you're a corporation, if you're self-employed, I can do 1 year for a self-employed person, jumbo loan to 2 million. It's pretty incredible. We basically use all of conventional guidelines to qualify, even though it's a jumbo loan. So there's a lot of options. We can do 15% down on duplexes up to 2 million, which normally you couldn't do. You had to stay with the conventional limit on duplexes of $1,053,000. But now we can go much higher. So just some incredible products and things that we can do. Obviously, all of our turn times are back to normal because we're not nearly as busy as we were, which is fine. I got a deal from opening escrow to today is day 10 of escrow, and I'm clear to close. So we'll have docs out tomorrow, day 11. So incredible turn times, obviously. I got a jumbo loan closed yesterday in 17 days. So that's kind of the update.
That's impressive.
It's cool now. It's awesome. Awesome to see. Yeah. Bill?
What? What? Did you want the master to speak? No, I'm not going to speak. I thank you for your comments.
Yeah.
Thank you for David's comments as he's defending whatever. I appreciate Candace.
Facts.
We'll talk later, maybe. And Guido has a bet. Yes. All right.
Love it.
No, I liked it. It was a very enjoyable session with a very knowledgeable host.
Yeah.
Not you and David, but Anyway, Bruce was
I know.
very good.
Bruce is fantastic. So you guys, in November, in a couple months, we do have Tony Watson coming back because the property tax laws are scheduled to change. So he'll be giving us an update on what to expect. But what else would you like to hear about? You know, we have a few, you know, between now and the end of the year, we have a few more months. Would love to hear your feedback. What type of topics do you want to hear more about?
I know you will. I know you will. I have lots of topics I'd like to hear about. Everything I've heard about here is excellent. And I'm sorry I missed the June meeting, and I was all fired up for the July meeting, and you guys canceled on me, you know?
Oh, no, well, you know, the holiday, everybody was out of town for the first week.
Yeah,
of
but I was
July.
here. I was up on the roof. Yeah.
Property
Anyway.
management.
Oh, there's David. Dang, he is there. Okay,
Oh, he's here.
all right. All right.
Cheers, love. It's his birthday. Woo, woo, it's his birthday.
All right.
Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us.
We're very happy.
We will see you next month.
Signing out.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Happy birthday, David.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Stay safe out there. Stay safe out there.
And it was Natalie's birthday too, guys. So happy birthday to Natalie as
Happy
well.
birthday, Natalie.
Natalie, happy birthday.
Natalie's birthday, wow. Woo.
Yes, 2 days ago. Mhm.
Oh,
A year younger.
Yeah, she is younger.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all start counting backwards.
Yeah.
I know. Oh my God.
Hi, Liz. Oh, that's wonderful.
Everybody.
All right.
Good night,
Miss
guys.
you guys. We'll see you next month.
Next time. Bye-bye.
Ciao. Be well.